Have you ever heard someone laugh when you mention carrying a 22 ACP? They'll call it a mouse gun, a purse popper, or my personal favorite, barely better than throwing a rock. It's the kind of caliber folks joke about at the range while loading their Glocks and 45s, like it's just a step above a cap gun. But here's the thing. Those little jokes, they don't hold up when you start digging into the real-world data, the wound channels, and the downright scary stories that come from this tiny round doing serious damage. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of myth and misconception. We'll look at the numbers, the science, the gel tests, and more importantly, the people who've either walked away or never got up after a 22 ACP got involved. Think it's harmless? You might want to hold that thought, because this round, it has teeth. Let's be honest. If you hang around gun forums long enough, you'll see it. The 22 ACP gets roasted harder than a gas station burrito. It's the punchline caliber. Folks love to joke that it's only good for training your kid or scaring off raccoons. You'll hear things like, you might as well throw the gun, or it'll just piss them off. And hey, some of those memes are funny. I've laughed at more than a few myself. Movies don't help either. Hollywood loves to show people taking 10-22s to the chest and still charging forward like a T-800. Meanwhile, the bad guy with a 45 drops a man with one shot and a dramatic music cue. That contrast sticks in our heads, even if it's fiction. Add that to the fact that most 22 ACP pistols are small, shiny, and often marketed to beginners, and it's no wonder this caliber gets no respect. But just because it looks like a toy doesn't mean it plays like one. The problem with underestimation? It gets people hurt, or worse, and that's where things start to shift when you stop listening to the jokes and start listening to the data. Time to unpack what the 22 ACP is really made of, beyond just its size on paper. The 22 ACP, also known as the 22 short centerfire or 22 automatic, fires a bullet typically weighing between 29 and 40 grains. Most loads clock in around 900 to 1,000 feet per second, which on paper sounds modest, especially when compared to something like a 9mm pushing 115 grains at 1,200 FPS or more. But here's where people misread the numbers. The 22 ACP isn't about raw power. It's about precision, penetration, and predictability in compact form. Its small profile means it can sneak through soft tissue and sometimes even bone with surprisingly little resistance. In close quarters, that matters a lot more than you'd think. A clean hit to a vital area can be just as devastating as something from a much larger round. Also, there's the often ignored behavior of small caliber bullets when they meet resistance. While a heavier round might punch through and exit, a 22 has a nasty habit of bouncing around, ricocheting off ribs or veering off bone. One ER doctor once described it as like chasing a pinball inside someone's chest. That internal chaos can be way worse than a clean pass-through. Sure, the muzzle energy is lower, but we're not talking about stopping trucks. We're talking about stopping people. And when you factor in minimal recoil, faster follow-up shots, and the fact that many folks shoot better with 22s under stress, you begin to realize this little round isn't a joke. It's a scalpel in the right hands. What happens after the trigger breaks is where things get complicated and a little grim. Ballistic gel testing tells a sobering story. With modern loads, like Hornady Critical Defense or CCI MaxiMag, the 22 ACP can penetrate 9 to 11 inches in calibrated gel. That's flirting with the FBI's minimum standard for defensive rounds. And while that might not sound impressive next to a 45, remember, the real world isn't a shooting range, and tissue isn't consistent. Unlike heavier rounds that punch through and exit cleanly, 22s have a disturbing tendency to change direction once they hit bone. They deflect, they tumble. Sometimes they even ricochet off ribs and tear through vital organs on an unpredictable path. One ER surgeon described it to me as like trying to trace a squirrel on meth through a corn maze. You don't always know where it's going to end up, but it's never somewhere good. Wound channels from 22 ACPs might be narrow, but they're deep and erratic. Internal bleeding can be massive, especially when the bullet doesn't exit and continues to wreak havoc inside. And because 22 ACP produces less recoil. Follow-up shots come fast and tight, which means the likelihood of multiple internal injuries goes way up. When trauma surgeons talk about 22 wounds, There's a certain grim respect in their voice. It's not dramatic like a shotgun blast, but it's surgical, quiet, sneaky, and incredibly hard to fix. And that's often deadlier than sheer force alone. If you think 22 ACP can't be lethal, ask the Secret Service. March 30th, 1981, President Ronald Reagan is shot with a Rohm RG-14 revolver chambered in .22 long rifle, not ACP. Sure, but the ballistic performance is close enough to make the point. That tiny round ricocheted off the presidential limo and pierced Reagan's lung, stopping just an inch from his heart. He nearly died, and he wasn't even the shooter's primary target. Let's go closer to home. In a 2015 home invasion case out of Arkansas, a 78-year-old woman defended herself with a Beretta 21A chambered in .22 ACP. One round to the chest at close range dropped the intruder where he stood. Police said the bullet had pierced the heart. The weapon? Fit in her palm. The bullet? Not much bigger than a vitamin. And then there are the quiet cases, the ones that don't make headlines. An altercation behind a gas station, a domestic dispute gone wrong, a single shot fired from a tiny pistol, and someone never walks again. EMTs report that 22 wounds often look minor from the outside, just a red dot. But inside, the story can be catastrophic. These aren't theoreticals, they're facts. Law enforcement officers have recovered lifeless bodies with a .22 caliber pistol lying quietly nearby. It's not the flashiest way to die, but it's one of the most deceptive. And that's what makes the .22 ACP so dangerously underestimated. It kills in silence, in close quarters, and often, without giving anyone a second chance. Let's put feelings aside and look at the numbers. According to multiple FBI crime reports and CDC mortality data, .22 caliber rounds, including .22 LR and .22 ACP, are among the most common calibers recovered from fatal shootings in the United States. Surprised? Most people are. Now, does that mean the .22 is inherently more lethal than other rounds? Not exactly. But it does mean something just as important. When .22s are used, people often die, not because of high energy transfer, but because of where and how they hit, and how often they're fired. More rounds fired, more chances to hit something vital. Another factor is availability. .22 ACP is cheap, easy to shoot, and often the first caliber a new gun owner picks up. That means it shows up not just in self-defense, but also in accidental shootings and even criminal assaults. In many urban cases, it's the pocket gun, the kind that fits in a jacket and doesn't draw attention. And once the trigger's pulled, the stats speak for themselves. Medical journals report that .22 caliber shootings carry a higher fatality rate than many expect, especially when victims delay seeking treatment because the wound doesn't look bad. That kind of underestimation? It's what makes the .22 ACP quietly devastating. Forget assassinations and headline cases for a moment. Let's talk about real, everyday situations. Like the 65-year-old grandfather who stopped a carjacker in a grocery store parking lot with a single shot from his Ruger LCP-2 and .22 ACP. No screaming, no chase, just one quick draw, one well-placed shot. The suspect collapsed on the spot. EMTs later said the bullet had entered under the collarbone and nicked the aorta. Or the hiker in Oregon who found herself cornered by a wild dog while foraging. She wasn't carrying a big-bore revolver, just a North American Arms .22 ACP mini revolver on her ankle. It didn't look like much, but one shot scared the dog off. The second one ended the threat permanently. Even accidental discharges tell a brutal truth. A mishandled .22 ACP pistol left on a nightstand fired when dropped, striking a man in the abdomen. He walked into the ER under his own power and died 2 hours later from internal bleeding. These are not tactical fantasy stories. They're examples of how a tiny round, when combined with timing, distance, and circumstance, can turn into a fight stopper or a fatal mistake in self-defense or survival. The .22 ACP doesn't need to shout. It just needs to work, and it often does. Pop culture hasn't exactly done the .22 ACP any favors. In movies, it's the throwaway gun, the cheap pocket piece pulled by a side character who misses every shot or gets disarmed in 5 seconds. You've seen it. Shiny little pistol, shaky hands, followed by a dramatic monologue and zero impact. Even in memes, the .22 is the ultimate pew-pew joke. Internet gun culture paints it as the punchline to any debate about stopping power. Meanwhile, the 45 gets the heroic slow-mo montage, and the 9mm gets the tactical operator treatment. But here's the twist. That pop culture image works both ways. The 22's reputation as weak makes it underestimated, which, in the real world, makes it dangerous. Criminals don't take it seriously. Victims don't react fast enough, and sometimes, that shiny little movie gun ends up doing very real damage, without anyone realizing what hit them until it's too late. Step into any trauma bay or homicide unit, and you'll hear a very different tone when the 22 caliber comes up. Not mocking, not dismissive, measured, respectful. Forensic pathologists have called 22 wounds some of the hardest to track and repair. One veteran surgeon said, "If it doesn't exit, it's anyone's guess where it went." Law enforcement backs that up. Officers who've responded to shootings involving 22 ACP often note the contrast between what they expected to find and what they actually saw. A tiny entry wound, no exit. Yet the victim was dead on the scene. One detective told me, "It's the kind of gun that doesn't make a mess, but it sure finishes the job." Firearms instructors, too, have shifted their perspective. While many once shrugged off the 22 ACP, some now recommend it for elderly shooters or recoil-sensitive carriers, not because it's ideal, but because they can hit with it. And shot placement trumps caliber every single time. The consensus? The 22 ACP isn't magic. It's not the perfect round, but the professionals who've worked around it, on both sides of the muzzle, don't laugh. They respect it, quietly. And that quiet might just be the scariest part of all. If there's one thing seasoned shooters know, it's this: caliber doesn't excuse bad habits. Whether you carry a 22 ACP or a full-size duty gun, you're responsible for every round that leaves the barrel. That means knowing your weapon, training with it, and respecting what it can do, even when it's small, quiet, and underestimated. The 22 ACP isn't some magical death ray, but it's no joke either. In the hands of someone who practices, who places their shots, who keeps their head, this round can stop a threat, end a fight, and in some cases, change everything in a split second. If this made you think twice about what that little round is capable of, hit that like button and drop a comment. Have you ever carried 22 for self-defense? Would you? I'd love to hear your take. Stay safe, shoot straight, and I'll catch you in the next one.